Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstad and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers, here to talk Seahawks football. We've got all sorts of things to talk about today. The mock scrimmage, some injuries, some comings and goings of on the roster, as well as get you updated on today's a few things from today's practice as well. I am Bill Alvstad, and Keith is joining me. Welcome in, Keith.
Yeah, I'm fresh off the beach and sitting down in the recording chair. So let's do this.
Yeah, nice. So I'm here, and Keith is still at the beach, and maybe halfway through the show he might join us here. So training camp.
Mentally, I'll be at the beach the entire time, but physically, I'm back. So.
So I just want to catch you up on everything, including up to the minute stuff. Just posted, Corbin Smith reported that Reek Woolen has passed his physical and is returned to practice for the Seahawks this afternoon, Sunday as we record. That's great news. It'll be very, very interesting to me what happens now on the outside corner spots. You've got Trey Brown and Michael Jackson that have been holding down the fort while Woolen has been out. Now that Woolen's back, does Mike Jackson go and revert over to the other side? Does Trey Brown stay there and Jackson kind of works in on both sides? It'll be very curious to see how they treat that as time goes on this week and in the first preseason game, which is coming up very quickly on Thursday evening. So,
yeah, a lot of decisions to make. There's not the usual cut downs, but at some point you got to get guys prepped for a season and get guys working together. And the defensive secondary, there's a lot of communication that has to happen in this defense because of the way they do their zones. So they really want to get the guys working together as a unit in practice and everything before it becomes they get on the field. So my guess is there's going to be some decisions made here in the near future as to where guys are going to play, at least at the beginning of the season.
In addition, Artie Burns had arguably the best defensive back outing at the mock scrimmage as well, with three pass defense and so forth. And everyone is saying that he's just been looking really sharp in camp, including Pete Carroll. So there's a lot of competition there. Tariq Woolen, Witherspoon, Jackson, Brown, Kobe Bryant's coming in on to play in nickel and dime coverages between being a corner in the slot and also being a free safety as well. I just find that really interesting. Quandre Diggs-Adams, Julian Love-Adams isn't back yet. Haven't heard much from Jarek Reed yet, our draft pick out of the sixth round in the draft, but I'm sure he'll work in as well. So just a plethora of choices there. Seahawks just announced that they've waived MJ Anderson at defensive end, and they re-signed Roderick Perry, the defensive tackle, and he was at practice today as well. Tariq Woolen was at practice as well. I think I mentioned that, but just want to make sure. All right, that's what's going on today. Let's talk about Dee Eskridge for a minute, Keith. Here's the situation. The NFL suspends Seahawks receiver Dee Eskridge following a domestic violence arrest this last winter. By that, and then the pleading of the guilty plea and working that out in court has then violated the league's personal conduct policy, and he was arrested for misdemeanor assault. I understand it's a misdemeanor 4, which is the lowest possible assault charge that you can have and still be charged. He's apparently agreed to go through a diversion program for 12 months. Once he completes that charge goes away. And but by all accounts, what a domestic violence misdemeanor 4 would be for is it could be just as simple as, I don't want to speculate too much, but it could be just as simple as grabbing a wrist or whatever. I mean, it is a human touch against a domestic partner that is not condoned or asked for or whatever. So
Yeah, true, but we also don't know what happened, and oftentimes prosecutors will agree to a lesser charge just to get the case finished and off their desk. So it might have been
also,
something more serious than that.
also, the opposite could be true. Prosecutors are very well known for wanting to have some sort of deal or plea at any level to basically get this thing on the books and make sure that the victims are taken care of and so forth, in case something in the future happens. So it's complicated. Again, we're not here to speculate, just here to report that. So what that means for the Seahawks is he's going to miss the first 6 games of the regular season. That's going to take you all the way to the game where the Seahawks bring out their vintage uniforms in October. And just kind of wanted to see where you're at on this. It's the worst case scenario for Eskridge, although I understand the team's kind of sticking with him. I don't believe that he's going to be cut because of this. What's this do to his standing with the team in the wide receiver room?
Well, you're right, they won't cut him because basically he is inactive. He doesn't eat up a roster spot, and they don't have to pay him for those 6 weeks. He's just there, and if somebody gets hurt while he's gone, then they can bring him off the inactive list, and he's ready to go. So I don't think he'll get cut by it. But what it's going to do is it's going to do the same thing it's done the other years in his career, where he wasn't here, wasn't integrated into the offense, didn't really have a role, didn't really have a way to contribute, and then was just another body on the back end of the roster. And he can't afford to do that. This was his year. He needed to actually show that he deserves a roster spot. And this is just going to completely derail that. I think this could really start to signal the end of his career
With Seattle.
Yeah.
He's a very talented guy. I would imagine he'll have another opportunity. Yeah. So anyway, I'm just going to leave it there because we could keep going on this domestic violence thing, and it's hard to speculate, and I don't want to. So we'll just leave it there. Teams addressed it. Eskridge's spokespersons and attorneys have addressed it. It's in the legal system now, and it sounds like he's on the right track in that respect. And then he'll be available after week 6 with the Seahawks, and we'll just see how that goes. And that's essentially what Pete said. We'll just see how this goes. He's got to do the deal, and then we'll see.
Yep.
Unfortunately, other news for a wide receiver, Seahawks wide receiver Derek Young is being evaluated for a possible sports hernia. That's Pete's words. And we don't know any information as of Sunday afternoon. How those tests have turned out, whether he's going to need treatment or if he's going to need surgery. Surgery in that respect at this stage of preseason is almost a lost season. That could be 8 to 10 week recovery on that, and that's without being able to run or cut or anything. So he wouldn't come back into shape until probably towards the end of the season.
Yeah, that's a big loss. It really is, especially because you're looking at the wide receiver room and thinking, wow, this room had gone from being a 2-man room to being fairly deep, but then now you lose the guys that should have been your 4th and 5th wide receivers. You got your top 3, and then there's a gap, and all that depth is now going to be pushed.
Yeah. Pete said right now we don't have a decisive plan whether he needs any work. Right now we're just going to rest him and see if he can bounce back. So that's going to be the first order of business, is trying to diagnose this thing for sure, know what it is, if they can treat it, if he can rest it and come back, and he misses the first 2 or 3 weeks that's the best case scenario for him. It seems at this point. Maybe it's less than that, and he comes back sooner. But boy, that's a tough deal for Seattle. Obviously, that then creates a bunch of opportunity for the cast of wide receivers behind those guys, including Matt Landers, Cade Johnson, Cody Thompson, Jake Bobo. Yeah, and understand that Jake Bobo's rising above everyone else out of that group to be a guy that I think you're going to hear a lot more about, considering those two receivers we just talked about are going to have some time off the roster.
Led the everybody in receptions in the mock game, and a lot of those were contested catches. Locke throwing into really tiny windows, and Bobo going up and getting the ball, and kind of impressive.
Yeah, and we're going to talk more about that specifically here in just a little bit. I just wanted to work through these things really quick because I wanted to catch everybody up. Corner Andrew Whitaker suffered a season-ending injury in the mock game. He's out. He was an undrafted rookie free agent, defensive back, kind of a tall, fast, quick guy, and probably unlikely to make the roster, but maybe a practice squad candidate. He's now on injured reserve. Running back Kenny McIntosh in the mock scrimmage game injured his knee in the third quarter, sprained his knee, quote unquote, and don't know if that sprain is a big tear, a small little tear that he can kind of spend a week or two, rehabbing and resting and then come back. We'll have to wait and see.
But we got better news from the running back room, as Zach Charbonnet has been cleared and he's back. Yes. And Ken Walker apparently is getting closer to being back as well. So it looks like they're going to have
on Ken Walker, but yeah,
it looks like they're going to have their two top backs, back here ready for the season. So that's good news.
And Charbonnet's back practicing today. They just held him out of the mock scrimmage out of precautions.
He only had a couple practice.
Exactly. Darrell Taylor ended up injured prior to the mock game, did not play in the mock game. He has a sling on his arm, and it's a sprained shoulder. And Pete said that it will not require surgery. Mm-hmm. So it's just a matter of resting him. So it must be something fairly minor. We'll take a look and see how that goes. I mentioned earlier, Seahawks are bringing back Roderick Perry, defensive tackle. He was cut earlier in the week, and he's back. All right, let's talk about the mock scrimmage a little bit. The basic format was the number one offense went against the number two defense, and the number two offense squared off against the number one defense. And then they kind of traded back and forth. Eventually, they had some twos against twos, threes against threes, and so forth in this game. But the first team offense and the first team defense both looked good. Geno Smith looked ready to go, and the run defense looked good. We've potentially got three new starters there with Dre Jones, Jerron Reed, of course, coming back, and then Mario Edwards looks like he's going to get a starting nod out of this thing.
I mean, the front was the worst part of the defense last year, so it shouldn't be too much of a surprise that all three starters have been replaced, and they've gone and got guys that they think are better fit schematically for what they want to do. I don't like part of it. Like I want to see more, because going against that second team offense meant they were going against some guys that on the offensive line that won't make the roster. And I didn't want to see how they do against a better offensive line than a group of second and third string guys.
Yeah, well, I think they'll make the roster, but they may not play. They may not suit up on Sundays. We'll have to wait and see. But, the second team was Anthony Bradford, our most recent draft pick. He's going to be there. Olu Otimi, he's going to be there, obviously. Stone Forsythe, Jake Curhan on the other side. Those are not primo starters, but we're expecting good things out of those guys. But our first team defense is actually looking pretty good. Got some good push. Jerron Reed and Nwasu, and then Boye Mafe apparently had one of the best standout performances for the defense.
And
while
Devin
Taylor
Bush
was out, I want to mention Taylor was out, so he didn't scrimmage. Boye Mafe got the start.
Yep. And Devin Bush had a good scrimmage as well.
Yeah.
Which is important because there's just nothing, you know what I mean? The depth behind Bobby Wagner is so slim. And there's supposed to be a second middle linebacker on the field at all times. So they need a guy like Devin Bush to step up and do well. And he looked quick. And that's kind of the important part for him is it has his quickness, returned. And he looked quick in the scrimmage.
Yeah. And the other one is Mario Edwards. So, these are two vets that have come in for Mario Edwards. This is like fourth or fifth chance with the team. But Devin Bush, this is his opportunity to break away from the Pittsburgh Steelers system and kind of reset his career. And so we'll see how that goes. But I think both players are going to have an impact on the team this year. As far as being heavy rotation guys. And you mentioned Devin Bush. I think that is probably even more critical because you're right. There really isn't anything there. Now, Vi Jones might come along and eventually take that spot from him. I don't know if it's going to happen week 1 or week 6, but it seems at least he's going to be ready in the wings until Jordan Brooks returns. And then it's going to be the Bobby Wagner Brooks kind of show. But until then, I think you're going to see a blend of different players in that spot. So, DK Metcalf looked good. I think Geno Smith looked great. He looked ready to go in this mock scrimmage. He got the ball to DK Metcalf a couple times for about 50, 60 yards. Jackson Smith and Jigba had a couple of opportunities as well for about 37 yards. You had mentioned Jake Bobo. Bobo had 7 receptions for 77 yards, I believe, something like that. 76 yards, and a touchdown. Thompson had 4 receptions for 54 yards. Metcalf again for 51. Eskridge had 3 receptions for 40 yards. Looked good also in a kick return situation. And overall, it looked okay. Conversely, on the other side, our running backs didn't look great for the most part, and they were kind of held in check by our defense, which I thought is one area that is being emphasized by this team this year to improve on what they did last year. Last year, they defended the pass pretty well, but against the run, they were 26th or 27th in the NFL. And you'd mentioned 3 new starters this year so far. And the hope is that they're going to have a big impact this year. And right out of the gate, it's okay. Obviously, we didn't have our top 2 runners in this game, and it really doesn't matter anyway. It's just kind of a nice thing for the public to be able to come out and see how the team's doing and so forth. But it gives you a little insight as to kind of where we're at and where they plan on playing players and in what order now through a couple weeks of camp. So,
yeah, I mean, DJ Dallas had that touchdown on that first drive, but you're right. After that, there wasn't much from any of the running backs. But I mean, without Charbonnet and Walker in there, you're not looking at guys that are going to carry a load for any team. So, these are back of the roster guys fighting for a job, and so you kind of don't expect them to have the big plays there.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to talk about really quick is Boye Mafe, though. Pete singled him out as standing out, quote unquote. Pete Mafe probably appears to be the most improved guy from last year. Right now, he's battling to be one of the featured rushers as well as a featured guy on early downs too. It seems like Boye Mafe has a chance to really impact the snap count of Darrell Taylor, I think, first and foremost. If Boye Mafe is the guy that's defending the run better, he was last year. It seems to me that if he's going to improve or take a little leap, most improved player so far in camp, according to Pete Carroll. He and then doing the pass rush stuff. If he can add that into it, he could be a real weapon for us this year, I think.
Yeah, I mean, last year they they gave Bruce Irvin more snaps than I think anyone other than Irvin would have liked. And they really need Mafe to kind of step up and take that role and the early down guy. And he's going to lose some snaps to Taylor when Taylor's healthy, just because he's such a good gifted pass rusher. But at the same time, right? That also means that teams are throwing on first or second down. Mafe is going to get a chance to rush the passer too. So, but he's definitely making a play for a much larger role, getting a lot more snaps this year.
Yeah, in this game, he had a strip sack against Locke. He had another
it was an
sack.
Accidental strip sack.
He had
'Cause
another
you're not allowed
sack
to touch
that was
the quarterback.
that was called back because Abraham Lucas got called for holding on it, but he would have been there because he completely beat Lucas to a spot. And then Jaron Reed and Draymond Jones also had sacks, quote unquote, on Locke. Basically got to him, in a normal game, it would have been a sack. But in 5 drives, Seattle starting unit didn't allow a touchdown, against Drew Lock's units. So that's pretty good. I'll take it.
Yeah, the offense, on the other hand, went. They scored on their first 3 possessions.
Yeah, it was 17-0. Yeah.
Yep.
With
and that was nice to see. Just, they made a couple mistakes and ended up with some field goals, but overall, it was a pretty smooth showing by Geno Smith and company, even without a working running game.
And I think that's a testament too to the offensive line. They got the ball out quick. They spread the ball out. Geno threw the ball away. If it wasn't there, he didn't try to force anything. Again, spread it out, march the ball down the field with a couple of big plays. He could add another big play with Metcalf, but Metcalf dropped the ball. It was right there, and Geno would have been over 200 yards. It's nice and impressive. On the other side, I mentioned Artie Burns earlier. He's a veteran. Some fans may not even know his name. He was on the roster last year but didn't play. I think he played 1 or 2 snaps the entire year because Woolen and Mike Jackson really kind of solidified those outside corner spots and played the entire year. But Artie Burns is a veteran, former first-round draft pick. He's kind of on the back end of the talent pool at defensive back. You take a look at Woolen and Witherspoon and Jackson and Brown and Bryant, and then you've got Burns. And so he might be on the outside looking in, but with that veteran presence, Pete Carroll mentioned him, it's been really solid. He said he's been the veteran guy, showing the other guys how to work and make the calls. Very good technician. He's playing very good football. And he said the same things last year, which is interesting to me. But, the younger guys came through for us last year, and I don't see it being any different this year. So we'll just have to see how that goes.
Yeah, the team showed that they were willing to have him there as a safety valve in terms of injury all year, and kept him on the roster, and then went out and re-signed him. So it overall, I wouldn't bet against him making the roster. They showed last year that he doesn't have to be a starter to make it, even as a vet.
So one of the last things I really wanted to talk about was Jake Bobo. You had mentioned Bobo earlier as a guy that we're going to be talking about more as time goes on here, and I totally agree. Leading receiver in the scrimmage with 7 catches for 76 yards and a 12-yard touchdown from Locke to win the game on the final play, quote unquote. Smith said Bobo's been doing a great job ever since minicamp and OTAs. He was a guy who was showing up on tape, making plays consistently, a guy who knows his assignment. He's got a lot of confidence, a lot of swag. Everybody around him loves Bobo, and we're happy to see him make those plays because he can really be a good football player.
Yeah, he's a guy that, he went undrafted, but a lot of the reason he went undrafted was because of a really bad combine. He just tested really, really poorly, but his tape is actually pretty good. For a guy his size, he's quick in and out of breaks. He's got great hands, as you saw in the mock game. And it's one of those things where maybe the testing doesn't show where he's truly at. I mean, he's not athletic to a point where he's gonna, make people forget about DK Metcalf or something like that. But he's maybe not as bad as people have been led to believe from his combine scores.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, his agility and his straight line speed just wasn't there. But there's a lot more to that than just being fast in the NFL, as we know. And he's like 6'4", 6'5"?
He's 6'5".
210 pounds or whatever. Big wide receiver, big body, big red zone target. And if he knows how to get open, knows how to manipulate his body to win those contested catch situations, and he's got great hands, he's definitely got a chance. And we've been talking about Matt Landers as a guy that would be athletically better for the roster, but that's not necessarily true. That's only true because we're a little biased in those super athletic guys that have that straight line speed. But Bobo may very well be the better wide receiver, especially if you take a look at the rest of the mix of wide receivers in the wide receiver room. You want a guy that's kind of a possession guy out of that group.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and with the two guys that were thought of as the fourth and fifth wide receivers now out, right? You need guys to step up and take that role. And Bobo's making plays in camp. He made plays in the mock game. He'll get his opportunity to show that he deserves snaps, once these preseason games begin.
Can you believe we've reached the week that we're having our first preseason game, Keith? I mean, it's been one of those off seasons where we just kind of been plugging along, churning through show after show, 2 or 3 times a week, bringing as much content as we can. And all of a sudden, here we are. Our next episode probably is going to be a preview show for a game. So
I'm excited for that. Like, I'm ready for this team to get out there, play against someone else, for you and I to actually be able to talk scheme a little bit and how guys are being used and all that kind of stuff. Like, I'm ready. It's been a long off season.
And for us and the broad fan base to actually be able to see these players we've been talking about. A lot of these things you've watched little video clips here and there on Twitter or whatever, or on the Seahawks site, or once in a while you can tune in to Seahawks.com for Training Camp Live. But they really don't show a lot. And so fans are just kind of excited to kind of see this thing in motion now. See Geno Smith, see and Jigba, Charbonnet, but it looks like he's going to be ready for this game. Tariq Woolen's back, Reek Woolen, and to see that secondary and some of the new guys, Jones and Reed and Cameron Young on the defensive line. It should be fun. Should be a lot of fun. That's all I've got. And, I thought we'd come back, early in this week and preview this game. I think it's the Minnesota Vikings, if I'm remembering right. I don't have that written down, but that's the first preseason game on Thursday evening. And then we'll come back right after that and talk about the game and review that and put that show out as well. I think probably on Friday, I think.
Yeah, Thursday, 7 p.m. game against the Vikings. Good memory.
Yeah. So that's it. That's all we've got for this show. Short and quick. Just wanted to get you all updated on what's going on as of Sunday afternoon, and we'll come back at you and preview this game. So you can find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. You can find me at NW Seahawk. The show is Seahawks Playbook Podcast. If you look it up on your favorite podcast platform or our YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button when you do, so you get them into your feed every time we release a new show. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.